see what the relationship was, because you hear so much about Cane Hill in letters and diaries and all sorts of things. And I found what I'm going to share with you today is just from an article that the historian Dr. T.L. Ballinger, who was at Northeastern State a long time ago, in the 30s did. I saw Marge had one of the little books around Choctaw Council fires, I think. He was one of the real early historians. And what he said was that this article that I'm going to draw information from about Cherokees who were here, about the similarities in curriculum, about the exchange of teachers and that sort of thing. He said the information was gleaned from so many sources, it's not advisable to try to cite all of them. Through personal interviews with old-timers who knew some of these facts from newspapers, college catalogs, various other sources, and from the daughter of that officer, I think it was Major Earl, who was the president of the college here, and he was also an officer during the conflict when we were invaded by the Yankees down here. And, so to kind of start with the, let me see if I can get the, well, I got it at the wrong side here. This, you all, is Mount Holyoke, if I'm saying it correctly. And this is the institution where the teachers who taught here at Cane Hill and also at Northeastern State when it was the Cherokee Female Seminary. I don't know why you bring that up. That's another 100 years later, I guess. But we had a Princeton graduate who was the nephew of our Chief Ross. And he and another guy named David Van, not the one that's got the real pretty old-time turban and honey jacket on, some later David Van, they were sent by the tribal government back to go to schools in the East and look at their curriculums and to look at recruiting some educators to bring back here. From all the reading you can do, their intention was to have a girls' finishing school so that young Cherokee ladies would have the same educational background and all the social graces and be confident if they needed to go to Washington on diplomatic missions with their husbands. They wanted them to be well prepared. And so they went back east and went to schools, but Mount Holyoke was the one that they centered on. And they both had similar curriculum and conduct. Their first principals at both schools were from Mount Holyoke. Miss Graham here at Cane Hill, Miss Ella Whitmore at Choctaw, and then she got married, and back in those days, if you got married, you weren't qualified to teach school anymore. You had children and husbands to teach. These are the two schools. I think this one is the male seminary. That one is Cane Hill. That's the building we're in. This is one of the early day instructors here who was often, he was a Cherokee missionary. He was at the White Mission before it was moved to Oklahoma, and he was there after it was moved to Oklahoma. Presbyterian. He was some other brand, but apparently he comported well with the Presbyterians, and he was over here also. And here are some of the students, and these people, that is Uncle Clem Rogers. He was at the Oklahoma's initial legislative session. He was instrumental in the formation of the state of Oklahoma. He was described as rich, regal, and remorseless. And where remorse came in was over the losing of the Cherokee Nation. He fought it. He fought statehood as long as he could. as a Cherokee senator, and when the fight was lost, he represented the district that now bears his name, Rogers County, Clairville, in the Oklahoma legislature. His wife, Mary America Shrimpsher, she and her sisters went to school here. Now these are old settler people. These are families who came before the forestry movement. And I think what they're best remembered for now is their son, Will Rogers. This is kind of the curriculum I was talking about a while ago. They ran it on what they called the Mount Holyoke Plan. And that plan said book knowledge is good, but also the meticulous refinements thought essential to good breeding. Cherokee girls were no poor imitation of the refinements of the graduates of the Eastern universities with them. And to give you an example, the music teacher in 1887 was some kin to the Czar, and of course they were having trouble over that way. I couldn't find any photo of the prince, and I'm wondering now, was he a prince or just a well-to-do Russian who came out on the frontier under the pretense of hiding, and he found a place where there were refined people who wanted refined music teachers with good taste. It's something to look into. This is the president of the college, and there's a lot about him, where he came from, and it was his daughter that informed a lot of this information about these similarities in the schools. Okay, this lady is just famous. She was the principal at the female seminary. And, you know, President Earl, when the war broke out, he was an officer and he had a captain in his command named Mr. Buchanan. Now, Captain Buchanan's sister, Miss Amanda Buchanan, was the instructress of painting here at Cane Hill. And Miss Florence was engaged to him, but he was killed in the war. And so she was a driving force, and in all the literature about the female seminary, you're going to find her and find Cherokee girls reminiscing about how stern she was. Wilson adhered to the philosophy and strictly enforced her rigid rules for student behavior. She personally directed curriculum, school activities, and the students' daily lives. Under her stern manner and public facade was a warm, sympathetic, dignified woman whose acts brought respect and loyalty. She became a role model for acculturation of the Cherokee girls by emphasizing upper-class, non-Indian cultural values. So y'all, we really have to, it's a little hard for us to embrace when we so desperately want to preserve our culture now, that these schools were doing their best to prepare our people to live in a white world. They had a reason for that. They wanted to preserve the body politic. They wanted to preserve us. At that time, they thought that's kind of how to do that. Now, I couldn't find a picture of old Sam Starr. Y'all remember that tomorrow night, old Sam and his lovely bride there, Miss Bell, they're going to do the reenactment of their horse thieving trial at Judge Parker's courtroom. But since I couldn't find a picture of old Sam, I got his dear old dad, Uncle Tom Starr. He's also from an old settler family, and Uncle Tom, I'll talk a little bit about him, and some of his children came to school over here. And they grew up in turmoil because of the Civil War. He was the guy who 32 masked men rode up in the yard and murdered his father because of their connection with the Treaty Party. And Uncle Tom said, according to legend, it's probably pretty much true, that he would get every one of them. He'd find out who they were, and he was going to kill them all. And it was said that on his deathbed, Uncle Tom said, well, I got all of them except them that died of old age before I could get to them. But Sam came to school here for a while. And I don't know how much he learned, but in the turmoil that followed the Civil War, the family, Uncle Tom, would harbor, he was exiled sort of from this part of the country just across the border, around Westville, the Flint district up in there, around Stillwell. He went way down south on the Choctaw border to live, perchance not to fight with people anymore. And that was in 45, and they lived down there in 61. And after the Civil War, his children had grown up in turmoil, and it seemed like they associated with desperate people. And these outlaws came up from Dallas, and this lady was with one of them, and something happened to him, and she took up with Tom Starr. And they're best noted now because they made good pulp fiction back in the day. The writers had a great deal of imagination about what all went on. And sometimes, apparently, they harbored fugitives. So, not everybody that came out of these institutions was altogether, some of the refinements didn't take, I guess. There's a lot of connection between the families, more than what I've just mentioned. People that went to school here, went to teach at Choctaw, and vice versa. So that's a pretty interesting subject for more later, but that's enough for me now. I wanted to share with you all that much of those connections. Thanks.